Some stories just stick with you, not because they're dramatic or over the top, but because they feel real. Tonight, we're looking at 3 encounters people say they actually lived through. Believe them or don't, that's up to you. In April of 1973, the quiet little town of Enfield, Illinois became the center of something strange. It started with a young boy named Greg Garrett. He was playing alone in his backyard when something appeared. He told his parents he'd seen a creature, low to the ground, 3 legs, short arms with claws, and eyes that glowed red. It didn't speak, it didn't growl, it just lunged at him. According to Greg, it scratched at him and tore up his shoes before quickly vanishing. That alone would have been unsettling, but it wasn't an isolated story. Not even an hour later, just down the road, another resident, a man named Henry McDaniel, was at home when he heard something scratching at his front door. When he opened it, he didn't find a person or even an animal. He found something else. He described it as gray, with thick skin, 2 short arms, and 3 legs. Its pink eyes were the size of flashlights. Henry did what most of us would probably wish we could do in that moment. He slammed the door, grabbed a pistol, and fired 4 shots. The creature didn't scream, it didn't bleed, it just hopped away, covering an estimated 75 feet in 3 bounds, according to Henry. The police came to investigate. They found deep scratches on the siding of the house and odd footprints in the yard. The prints didn't match any known animal. They had a dog-like shape, but with 6 pads. Word spread fast. Local papers ran the story. Crowds showed up hoping to see the creature for themselves. Henry McDaniel stuck by what he saw. He even claimed the creature came back 2 weeks later and stared at his house from a nearby railroad track. Some said it was just a wild ape. Others said it was a hoax. UFO researchers at the time thought it might have been something not from here. Greg Garrett, the boy, eventually changed his story, but many believe his family was pressured. The case was never solved. The thing is, neither Greg nor Henry had anything to gain by making this up. They weren't selling books, there was no movie deal, just 2 people who saw something. And if they're telling the truth, then there's still something out there, just off the road in Enfield, Illinois. On the edge of a cliff in Colombia, overlooking the mist-covered Tequendama Falls, stands a mansion that once drew the country's elite. It was called Hotel del Salto, the Hotel of the Leap. Built in the early 1920s, it was meant to be a symbol of elegance. The architecture was European. The view was breathtaking. From the windows, guests could see the falls thundering hundreds of feet below, surrounded by green cliffs and dense forest. For a while, it worked. Politicians, socialites, artists, they came to relax, to dine, to drink. But the hotel's charm didn't last. Over time, the surrounding area began to change. The Bogota River, once clean and vibrant, became polluted and foul-smelling. Tourists stopped coming. The parties stopped. And then, the rumors began. People started calling it the Suicide Hotel. Locals claimed that over the years, dozens of people had thrown themselves from the hotel's balconies down into the gorge. No one kept an official count, but the stories were always the same. A guest would check in, seem normal, maybe even happy, and then, without warning, disappear. Some blamed the water. Others said the hotel was cursed. Staff who worked there in its final years claimed to hear things. Whispers behind closed doors. Footsteps pacing hallways that should have been empty. One housekeeper reported hearing a woman humming inside a locked room. When she opened the door, there was nothing but an untouched bed. By the early 1990s, the hotel was shut down completely. It stood abandoned for over 20 years, falling apart slowly as vines wrapped around its pillars and the forest began to take it back. Paranormal investigators started showing up. Ghost tours followed. One visitor said she stepped inside and felt like she wasn't alone, like something was watching her every move. Another described an urge, not to jump exactly, but to walk toward the edge. Not fear, not peace, just pull. In 2013, the building was reopened, not as a hotel but as a museum, part restoration, part memorial. The government hoped to preserve its history, but the locals? Many still refuse to go near it after dark. Some say the hotel remembers, that something still lives in those walls. And if you stand near the balcony at night, with the wind just right and the river roaring below, you might hear a voice, faint, almost inside your own thoughts, whispering, just one more step. On the night of June 9th, 1912, something terrible happened in the town of Villisca, Iowa. Josiah and Sarah Moore had invited 2 neighbor girls to spend the night. The house was full, 8 people total, including their 4 children. They went to bed. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But by morning, all 8 of them were dead, killed in their sleep, with an axe. The killer had waited in the attic, that much seemed clear. He or they came out sometime after midnight and went room by room, bludgeoning every person in the house. Investigators found that the mirrors had been covered, the windows shrouded, and a bowl of bloody water left on the table. There was no sign of forced entry, nothing stolen. It was one of the most brutal, senseless crimes in American history, and it was never solved. Over 100 years later, the house still stands, small, white, quiet. Locals call it the Villisca Axe Murder House, and it's become a destination, not just for true crime obsessives, but for those chasing something darker. Paranormal investigators from all over the world have visited. Some say the energy inside is suffocating. Others claim to hear footsteps above them, even though no one's upstairs. Doors are said to open on their own. Children's voices echo down empty halls. Cold spots, static in cameras. A few visitors have even left in the middle of the night, shaken and unable to explain why. One of the most chilling stories came from a man who stayed overnight during a tour. Around 1 a.m., he said he felt someone sitting on the edge of the bed. When he opened his eyes, no one was there, but the mattress was visibly compressed, like someone had just stood up. Another visitor tried using an EVP recorder. When they played it back, they heard a faint whisper say, "He's still in the attic." The house is now privately owned and operated as a museum. You can book a tour, you can even stay overnight, if you're willing. But visitors are warned ahead of time. You may not be alone, and if you hear footsteps in the attic, don't go looking. 3 different places, 3 stories that don't fit neatly into any explanation. Maybe they're just stories, or maybe the scariest part is that the people who lived through them never stopped believing they were real. Thanks for watching. If you want more stories like these, hit subscribe.